We are going to introduce plane geometry using three shapes: the triangle, the square, and the circle. This lesson is often called the presentation tray or the demonstration tray, which refers to the tray on the top of the geometry cabinet that holds these three shapes. It is the first introduction to the shapes in the geometry cabinet. At the preschool level, children pick up each puzzle shape using the pencil grip fingers, trace each shape using the dominant hand, and replace it back in its proper frame. This preschool lesson is sensorial in focus. The elementary introduction to the geometry cabinet with the presentation tray will focus on defining the attributes of each of these shapes and prepare students for further work with the triangles by angle and by side, the rectangles and the quadrilaterals, the polygons, and the curved figures. I am going to use the geometry cabinet shape puzzle to demonstrate this lesson, but you can use the geometry cabinet demonstration tray in the same way. In preschool, the order for introducing the three shapes is the triangle, then the circle, and finally the square. The rationale is that the three sharp edges of the triangle create a great sensory impression with wrist movement. The circle annuls that sensory impression before tracing those straight, sharp edges on the square. The circle then makes a break between the triangle and the square. The elementary order for introducing these three shapes is the triangle, then the square, and finally the circle. The rationale here is that the triangle is the first possible polygon we can make. Polygon simply means many-sided shape. If we only have two lines, we don't have a closed shape. It's when we add that third line connecting them at these vertex points that we get a closed shape. The triangle is the first possible polygon, succeeded immediately by the square as the next possible polygon. The circle is considered to be a polygon with an infinite number of sides. The strict definition in geometry for a circle is that it has 0 sides and 0 corners. However, in Montessori, we use the definition of a polygon with an infinite number of sides and corners because as you increase the number of sides in a regular polygon from 4 to 5 sides, let's say, we can see the gap shrinking and it becomes rounder and its perimeter more closely matches that of the circle's edge. Eventually, the number of sides will be so high and the length of the sides so small that the shape becomes perfectly smooth. A circle is what happens when you have so many sides and corners that we can't count them anymore. They have become infinite, making the shape perfectly smooth. This perspective helps children transition from these concrete, straight edge shapes to the abstract properties of curved figures like pi and circumference. We are going to present this lesson in the context of a Montessori 3-period lesson. The 3 periods or phases of the lesson are: this is the explicit teaching of the concept and the introduction and naming of the materials. Show me, the guided practice step where children show they understand by answering questions and engaging during the lesson. And finally, what is this? The immediate assessment where children demonstrate proficient process or recall. Elementary students will already know the names of these 3 shapes, so our focus is to identify these shapes not just by their names, but by their qualities. We will come up with a definition for each shape collaboratively with the students. Elementary students are interested in the world around them and they enjoy organizing and mastering it. I would gather my students around me and we would have these 3 shapes that they have worked with before, and we are going to start with a review. Always connect prior knowledge to the new knowledge that they are going to receive. I would say to my students, you've been working with these 3 shapes. Do you know their names? And they would tell me their names. And what I might do if I wanted to have my children practice some reading skills, I would give them little tickets with the name of the shape and have them match the shape names. So we have the triangle, the square, and the circle. Now, you know the names of all of these shapes, but how would we describe these shapes to someone who had never heard of this shape before? Imagine your friend has never seen or heard of a triangle, a square, or a circle. How could we describe each of these shapes so that your friend could know what you were talking about? Let's start with the triangle. What kind of words can we use to describe this triangle that makes it different or special from the square or the circle? And together we will come up with that it has 3 sides. And then I might have to point them inside and say, now I see these are little corners right here. How many corners does a triangle have? It has 3 corners. And at this point, you can decide if you want to give your students the geometry vocabulary of vertex, and all together they are called vertices. So a triangle has 3 vertices. Now let's do the same thing with the square. What can we say about the square that would help our friend know what we were talking about? Well, we've got, 4 sides. And let's look inside. I see how many corners? 4 corners, or 4 vertices. Now I'm going to stop here and jump into that second period of the lesson. This is the show me phase. I've introduced 2 shapes, so I want to check in and see that they're understanding. See if they can show me a shape that I ask for based on the definition that we have given them. I finished with the square, so I'm going to ask for this one first. I'm going to say, can you show me a shape that has 4 sides and 4 vertices? Yes, the square. Can you show me a shape that has 3 sides and 3 vertices? Ah, the triangle, yes. Now let's find a definition for the circle. How can you describe the circle? Most likely, you are going to get the standard definition from your students. 0 sides and 0 corners. And because this is the standard definition, we can accept this. This is true. If you have kindergartners in your group for this lesson, you may want to simply stick with this definition. However, if you have an older student or a middle student that has maybe seen this lesson in its basic form before, you might want to push on to that definition of the infinite corners and infinite sides. This is true that a circle has 0 sides and 0 corners, but it's also true that we can say that it has infinite sides and infinite corners. We have this circle. If I compare it to our octagon, can you see how the side is shrinking the space between the edge of the circle? The octagon is getting closer to being round like the circle. Let's try our decagon. Oh, look at that. The space is even smaller. What if I had a 12-sided shape or a 96-sided shape? At some point, there would be so many sides and so many corners that it would become smooth, just like the circle. I can always add one more line, one more edge. I can always add another corner. So we can say this circle is like an infinite number of sides and an infinite number of corners. Infinite sides, infinite corners. Just as a note, you may get a definition from a student that says a circle has 1 side. This is another way to describe a circle, to look at a circle, is that it has this one line that creates that circle. So maybe you get a definition from a student that says 1 side and 0 corners, and that's okay too. Let's add the vocabulary word vertices to our infinite definition. Now we are entering the second show me period. We jumped into the second period briefly after introducing the first two shapes to check for understanding. Now that we've introduced all the shapes in this lesson, we will leave the first period of naming and enter the second period to solidify the learning with a few games of engagement and recall. I will start with the circle because we just finished defining the circle and it is the freshest in the memory. Show me a shape that has infinite sides and infinite vertices. Yes, the circle. Show me a shape that has 3 sides and 3 vertices. The triangle, yes. Show me a shape that has 4 sides and 4 vertices. Yes. Now let's play a game. Give your friend a shape that has 4 sides and 4 vertices. And they'll give their friend a shape that has 4 sides and 4 vertices. Now, if you only have one child you're giving this lesson to, you can just say, give me a shape that has 4 sides and 4 vertices. Give your friend a shape that has infinite sides and infinite vertices. And they give that to their friend. Give your friend a shape that has 3 sides and 3 vertices. Now, who has the shape that has 3 sides and 3 vertices? And that child would give that shape. Who has a shape with 4 sides and 4 vertices? The square. Who has a shape that has infinite sides and infinite vertices? Yes, the circle. Now I could, for the circle, switch up these definitions. I really want to drive home the infinite view of the circle. And I am using vertices. I'm using this vocabulary because I want to drive that home. So you can adjust this to the children that you're giving the lesson to. Now let's go to the third period where we're going to wrap up the lesson. This is the what is period. And this is where we're going to assess our students' learning during this lesson. Close your eyes. When you open them, I'm going to ask you to tell me which shape is missing. What shape is missing? The square? Okay. What do you mean by the square? Oh, a shape that has 4 sides and 4 vertices? Yes, that is the missing shape. Close your eyes again. Open your eyes. What shape is missing? Yes, a shape that has 3 sides and 3 vertices. It's the triangle. Close your eyes again. Open your eyes. What shape is missing? Yes, the circle. And yes, it has infinite sides and infinite vertices. This game of a missing shape requires children to tell you what is missing. You are no longer using the words to describe the shape and having them just simply indicate the shape. You are asking them to give you the full definition and the name for that shape. Lastly, I'm just going to ask them to tell me what each shape is. What is this? And I'll wait for their response, the name and our definition. What is this? What is this? Now you want to show your students what follow-up work they can do on the shelf and during their work time. And they're going to be able to get this work off the shelf and practice with this material. One idea is to put your definition cards into a little basket, and your children can go and get this work off the shelf and match the definitions with the shapes. Another idea is to have an art activity on the shelf where the children will use paper shapes and make a picture out of them, labeling the shapes. Another idea is a booklet activity where you would have a piece of paper and they can trace the shape on the piece of paper, write the name and the definition of that shape, and make a little booklet for themselves. If your child has a math notebook, they could also do that in their math notebook. They could trace the shape, name the shape, and define the shape in their notebooks. In this video, we talked about the difference between the preschool and elementary order of introduction and the rationale behind each. We walked through the lessons using the Montessori 3-period structure, and we discussed follow-up options that students can do after the lesson to demonstrate their understanding of and proficiency with the concepts learned during this lesson. Please like this video if you found it helpful and consider subscribing so you won't miss any new Montessori lessons and tips for your classroom or homeschool.